Hi, everyone. This is Victoria Woelders at My Kids Locker COVID-19 Ed podcast. And today we have an amazing episode for you. It is a special episode, and we have some awesome friends that have joined us today to talk about self-care. So if you are listening, we'd love to hear more from you. So you can connect with me at mykidslocker.com. Or you can also hashtag MyKidsLocker and hashtag COVID-19Ed. So we are going to be going into a discussion with some other educators about what it means to be in a place of self-care. And during our time of our pandemic, there are a lot of issues centered around how do we navigate our emotional life? How do we navigate our mental health? And of course, as teachers, we are also trying to navigate the issues of how do we teach within these extraordinary situations and extraordinary season that we're all in. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us. And I am going to now ask our wonderful educators that have joined us today to introduce themselves. You all know that I'm Victoria Woelders, and I'm grade 4 teacher in Langley, BC. And your podcast host. And who would like to go next?
Great. Okay. My name's Ann Pimentel. I'm a resource teacher at James Kennedy Elementary School in Langley, British Columbia, Canada. I've been a teacher for about 20 years now, and probably about 15 of those I've been a resource teacher working in special ed from K to 12. And I also have two beautiful sons, grade 3 and grade 5. And thank you for allowing me to be part of this.
Hi, my name is Victoria Lindgren-Stryker. I am a teacher, middle years teacher, so grade 7 in Langley, BC as well. And I'm a mom to a little 2-year-old guy. So he's almost 2 in about a month.
And I'm Tim Stephenson. I'm a teacher at Walnut Grove Secondary School. And I've been doing that for pretty much a little over 25 years now. And I have 4 kids too, but none of them are in school anymore. They've all moved beyond high school. They're in school, but they're not in high school anymore. And but they're also being affected by the shutdowns of schools, even at the university and the graduate school level. So that's also an interesting angle to all of this.
So as you can hear, we have a whole bunch of educators here willing and open to talking about self-care, and we're going to get Victoria to lead our episode today. So Victoria, it's all yours.
Okay, so something I wanted to touch on for this special episode. First of all, I'd like to thank Victoria Woelders for inviting us to take part in this this COVID-19 Ed podcast that she's put together, but also to talk a little bit about the social emotional needs that we have during this time. There's been a lot of really great writing that's being put out about how we're all just grieving right now. We're grieving the loss of our normalcy in our lives. We have anticipatory grief toward what could be happening to the world that we're watching kind of fall apart in front of us. And I think part of educators' job, and parents, this goes to you as well, is to check in with that social emotional upheaval that children are experiencing. So whether you have a primary age child, a teenager, checking in with that social emotional self is something that's a really big piece of what educators will need to try to address as well for our kids. So we're going to just kind of have a panel discussion here where I'll pose some questions and just see the different perspectives that are on our panel, but also for us to try to connect with maybe some of the perspectives of the families that we work with, because there are many equity issues that come with education at this challenging time. So just to check in with our panel, how is everybody feeling right now? And why do you think it's important to check in with how you're feeling on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I actually think that the need to check in is very real, because the assumption can be made, oh, we're all doing fine, and we don't have that daily interaction with really anybody except for the people who might be in our households. I can tell you from my point of view, there's been some weird things like, boy, I tell you, if any scratchy throat or a cough, and I think, oh my gosh, it's starting. That's interesting. Those times that you wake up in the middle of the night when everything that can you imagine enters your head, and then it keeps you awake. And it's, coming from here, I'm an experienced teacher, and I've raised 4 kids, and yet here I am lying in bed at nighttime thinking, oh my gosh, what's going on? And it's a very unusual. I have to force myself to just calm down and relax. And we've got this, but you're not telling that to anybody. You're keeping it all inside, and so you have the chance to talk about it, and then to be able to say, "Are you feeling this way too?" I'm kind of curious. Like, is it just me, or is this everybody?
Okay, Anna or Victoria, how are you doing?
Victoria, you go ahead, because I know you were going to say something.
Well, I think for me, I've been really reflecting a lot on mindfulness and just feeling safe and being safe. And I don't know, over the last year, I've really tried to really put those practices into my life. And so I feel like this is kind of the rubber hits the road. And so sometimes I'll literally just put my hand on my chest and go, you are safe. And it feels better for me just to say that and repeat that. And I know last week my husband was sick a bit. I was losing my voice. And so I think for me, it's just a constant reminder that I am safe. But I do notice my own kids having conversations. Like late last night, I heard James over talking to Sarah and saying, hey, Sarah, I was just thinking, there's some of my friends that aren't going to have birthday parties. And then Sarah's like, yeah, you're right. My friends aren't going to have birthday parties. And so it's interesting hearing my kids' dialogue, because they're trying to process this too. Like, what is this? How does this impact me? But then how does it impact others? And so I think for me, as a teacher, as a mother, but also as a human being, I think trying to communicate to myself, to my family and my kids, that we are safe, and just trying to be in that moment, just literally in the moment, and just breathing and working on some deep breathing and prayer. I find that really helps me. And I feel like that's where I'm at right now, is just really working on those mindful activities. And how about you?
I feel like it's been a whirlwind. I feel like, especially at the beginning of March, you just felt like life was kind of like, okay, we're packing up for spring break, and we're going to have a great spring break. And these are all the activities. And, people saying, oh yeah, next week I'm going to go away to Hawaii. And all of a sudden, you realize like life has just put the pause button on. And so, I mean, even in myself, I see like just realizing just to be present at the time. Like as I'm moving through this, I notice like my son, who's the youngest, 8, like very clingy and very like, Mom, just sit with me. Mom, this, Mom, that, help me with this, help me with that. And just having that extra level of patience, I've noticed, and allowing myself also space, because my husband still goes to work. So I'm basically with the kids from like 9 to 5 right now. And so just knowing to give myself grace. And I know that there's a lot of like posts and stuff like that about like, how do you do homeschooling? How do you do this? How do you do that? And it also ramps up the anxiety, which I know Victoria had mentioned, this idea of like, what's going to happen, and also this loss of this grieving, but yet I liked what Tim said, that how we really need to make this opportunity a time of connection, like a time of reaching out, a time of allowing, even when we reach out, because I know, Victoria, we talked recently, like we send out text messages or make a phone call, and we don't necessarily get it back, but to give grace to those people during this journey, because A lot of people are trying to wrestle with, how does this look? Like, how does my life look? And like, even this morning, I reached out to some of my friends from a church group and said, hey, let's next Thursday. And right away, someone responded, said, I can't do it. I'm helping my daughter move, even though we're just going to meet for an hour next Thursday night. So it's just this grace in the responses we're getting brought towards us and the responses we're giving to other people, right? And just that navigation, I think, is also hard. Just how do we have those conversations, but also to have that grace and patience in them.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really what I really wanted to touch on here, is that we need to be empathizing with every person and every place that they might be coming from, right? Just because we can do some of these strategies, like Victoria, you mentioned that you were working on mindfulness and you've been working on that for some time. So you have a practice that you've established for yourself. So being able to tell yourself and believe yourself when you say, I am safe, that is something that somebody else might not have that mind skill over themselves to accomplish. So we need to bring in that empathy piece that Anne's talking about here and think about where people are coming from and what they might experience. And a known piece of being able to be positive in a challenging situation and to build that resilience is being grateful and having gratitude for the things that you have. So what are the silver linings that you are all experiencing, not only as teachers, but as parents? What kind of silver linings are you feeling?
In my situation, one of the silver linings is my children are in their 20s, and they live across the country. Some are local, some are far. But we've had so many more FaceTime calls and text messages. We've set up a family group chat that often is quite active first thing in the morning, even though the time zones from Ontario to BC are different. We get some pretty funny conversations going and some pictures being tossed back and forth. And in fact, we've set up a family dinner on Friday night. We're all going to have our computers open, and we're going to FaceTime while we cook and eat and maybe share recipes. And so it's not like this necessarily. It would just be, over there is Josh and Nikki, and over there is Katie and Travis on their respective computers and iPads and things. And that's going to be very interesting. And I guess I am guilty of being an eternal optimist. I love to look for silver linings in every situation. And this is forcing me to think of, because if you don't think of silver linings, my gosh, you think of all the other bad stuff. So, How about you?
Recently, I came across.
I think for me.
You go ahead, Victoria.
Oh no, you go, Anne. Your turn. You go.
Recently, I came across this wonderful poet named Morgan Harper Nichols, and I've been reading her very optimistic, very encouraging poetry. And I'm just going to read one of her poems here. It says, "May today be the day you pull back the curtains and let the sunlight pour in over absolutely everything. The walls, the bed, the ceiling, the floor. And take a mindful moment for the way it shines. In a way you have never had it before. And perhaps it might not fix everything, but perhaps it can remind you, no matter the shadows that fill the room, light will find the way through." And just this thought of just taking time to appreciate the beauties.
That was really nice.
Yeah, I just, like, even the light, like, I don't know about all of you, but the days have been just so beautiful with blue skies. And we had previously mentioned, like, we walked down to James Kennedy and they've boarded up all the basketball hoops and they've put layers of tape over everything. But then you look up and you're like, wow, the sky's still there. And just taking those moments of appreciation, I think I've been trying to work on that and allow my children to also be reflective on that. And I know Oprah has always, like, one of the things I was listening to on Oprah was like, every night to write 5 things that you appreciate, that are blessings to you. And so we've really stepped into incorporating that into like our nighttime bedtime routine. Like, let's say things that we're thankful for. And, it just makes you pause and realize, you know what, like, this is a painful time for a lot of people, but yet even in the shadows, we can see the light, and just taking that opportunity to know that there is things that we can see, that we can step into gratitude and smile and laugh and connect with others, like Tim was saying.
Honestly, I can't help but think that there's a possibility here that this whole situation could be one of the best things for humanity, because it's getting us to do these very things that you're describing, to notice things, the sky in the daytime and the stars at nighttime. And I wonder how much healthier we will be if we can continue to take these mindful moments even beyond the situation that we're in right now, and come out on the other side better for it. And that's what I'm really hoping happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, and I think I've really noticed a real interesting shift in social media. Like, people are starting to build up groups. Like, so for example, like the hearts on the windows. So I was out in the neighborhood this morning and I saw like three windows with hearts on them, and have groups where, put a heart on your window, and, kids are walking around and pointing out to all the hearts. And I think that's really beautiful. And I think that there's people coming together that don't normally come together. And there's conversations that are happening now because we just have a shared suffering that we didn't have before. Right. And I personally find, even just being in my neighborhood and smiling at someone, wow, how refreshing is that? Like, smile at someone and they smile back and you're like, wow, that was really nice. And I just think even just a smile now is just, I really appreciate that. Right. And bumping into some people that I know, it's like, how are you doing? Well, I'm not doing that great. Or, it's really hard right now. And hey, I feel the same way. There's this like empathy, compassion piece that is just so entwined in our lives right now. And I also find it interesting to see how people are reacting too, and how we can, as teachers as well as parents, model what it means to act in a kind and caring way when you're in the midst of suffering. Because I think kids are watching. Kids are listening. How are the adults around them showing how to love, or how to show resilience and grit, right? And that's a really important piece to this tragedy, to this pandemic, is, we're called to a higher standard as adults, and we have to try our best, even though we may not have the capacity, and we have to give each other grace in that too. We might not have the emotional capacity to have hard conversations, or the mental capacity to have hard conversations. So we have to give that grace, yet we also have to try to realize that our children are watching us, and that role modeling piece is an important piece, because who knows, maybe 30 years from now, they might be in our situation again, right? How are they going to act, right? Perhaps there might be another pandemic.
Well, and I think this is important because what you're highlighting here is that, adults are also going to have their own feelings throughout this. And I think it's a big challenge of our time for adults. We're called, especially as teachers, to be these really positive role models all the time. And sometimes that means we need to alter, on the outside at the least, the way that we feel in the face of others. So I think this is a time to not do that, to be a little bit more real, and to recognize when we are struggling, and it's amazing that we're starting to be able to talk to our neighbors about this, to talk to people, and really get that answer of, no, I'm not doing okay, and for that to be okay. So I really do want to encourage teachers and parents to also be thinking about this. When you're having a negative emotion, how are you navigating that with your children? Because that is going to happen, and that's going to be a part of this conversation as we move forward. So on that note, when in the next week in British Columbia, we're starting to face that challenge of what it looks like to teach through potentially online means. We've been mandated to provide a continuity of learning, the Ministry of Education said last week, and we still don't know the details of what that would look like, but many of us are presuming that this will constitute some form of online teaching. And then parents are then tasked with being the primary receiver of the communication in many cases. And Anne, you have a very unique position as well as a resource teacher, because the accommodations that need to be made for our students who have different types of learning challenges. So just moving forward and thinking about that empathy piece, whether it's adults navigating things, kids navigating things, teachers navigating things, what are the challenges we foresee with this homeschool model? What are things that we just have been thinking about while we've been on our spring break, but we're very much in tune with thinking about what it's going to look like on Monday?
Yeah, I just think, I know I have a little WhatsApp group with some friends that we went to high school with, and a lot of them are mothers, and there's this sense of panic and this sense of overwhelmingness and how is everything going to look. And I just think, honestly, we really need to also take care of the parents, the students, because when a parent is stressed, a child is going to be stressed. And so I think that we really need to tread lightly on how the information is conveyed, the expectations on that information, and like, how does that all look like in the shape of the day that they have? And again, this word grace, so we need to navigate as a teacher that the parents that we convey to this information, they're not going to look like us. They're not going to be like us. They're not going to convey the information like us. But they are the ones that are sitting next to their child, working with them during the day. And how are they feeling? I know that as for myself as a teacher, if I've come into working with a child, especially with special needs, and I've been stressed or agitated, they pick that up. And so I really think that hopefully as we navigate this within time, hopefully those nerves will calm. But I think there also is that point, I know Victoria had mentioned, Victoria Olson, that this idea is that we need to be able to be gentle in the empathy part, and that parents need to be able to step in, but step in the capacity they can step in. And that knowing if, the assignment is they need to finish this piece of writing by Friday, and if they don't get it done, that there's time and space for that, And so I guess that's the question, especially I know with Tim, he's in high school. So I think high school is going to look very different than elementary school. And I know the last day before spring break, I was talking to the kindergarten teacher who's been teaching for 20 years, kindergarten, and her comment was, how am I supposed to teach kindergarten? How am I supposed to teach play to 5-year-olds online? And that's the question. It's like, I think actually to have healthy parents and happy parents actually would be a better education and a better progress for these kids, with maybe reading with them and doing life skills stuff. And that's, on my front with the special needs kids, it's the life skills stuff that's most important, right? Do they know how to cook? Do they know how to bake? Do they know what a measuring cup looks like? Do they know how to garden? Do they know that bird is a chickadee and that bird is a finch, right? Like those kind of things that, as parents, I know for myself, I get so busy with doing stuff and going to basketball and going to swimming and going to work and stuff, that you don't really have that space to be able to point out those things and to actually be beside them while you're looking at worms in the dirt. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the thing, is it's like, let's build let this time be a significant relationship builder for the families. That's what I really hope. We can incorporate academics, and I'm kind of more leaning on the elementary front for me. but that relationship with the parents and the children, I think, needs to be significant. And what if we came out of this with parents saying, my relationship with my child is so much stronger?
Well, and I think that's really one of the silver linings that can come out of this. Like you also mentioned gratitude journaling, but hopefully people can start to recognize the experiential learning that is in their very homes that kids can learn about. And you have the opportunity, if you're able to be working from home at this time, to or maybe you're not working at all, to be able to tap into that experiential piece. So that's extra important, and maybe teachers can also tap into that. So instead of an assignment being, you know, some type of mathematics with fractions, maybe we're looking at you have to bake something, right? And there's all kinds of measurements that come with that. So Tim, what were you going to say about this homeschool challenge and teaching online challenge?
Well, I actually think that the stress that parents might be feeling is because they're imagining school as it was when they were students, sitting in rows, doing worksheets and rote learning and this sort of thing, and they don't know how to do that. And but this is a pivotal moment in the history of education, and an opportunity to completely reimagine the way we do school. And if we have the freedom to take on this new curriculum, which is very open, the idea of is that a chickadee or is that a finch or is that a sparrow or what is a worm? There's just so many. I heard a beautiful story. There's so many online now, people talking about their situations. I imagine this student wasn't on their spring break, but they were prevented from going to school and had said, you know, I've always wanted to learn how to use Dad's woodworking tools. And all of a sudden, Grandpa, who happened to be there, said, well, let's go up to the garage. And the person who was writing the article was writing the article on the desk that I got the impression sort of a middle school age child had built with the assistance of their grandfather. And and what a great learning opportunity.
Yeah.
And the problem is we're all living in this model that says learning comes out of a book.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's just not the case. And the pressure would come off everybody's shoulders if we could say, you know where you can learn? Anywhere. You can learn anywhere. You can learn anything. The idea that projects could be taken on. What a great opportunity now to get under the hood of a car, to learn to change a tire, to get into the kitchen, to get into the wood shop, to see where math is all around us, angles and distances and measurements, to go outside and stare at the stars and wonder what they are. And then from a teacher's point of view, what a great opportunity to create lessons now where instead of worrying about, we got to get ready for the test, is to just engage with the student and be real with them and say, you know what's really cool about this? Oh, I tell you, like there was we have a wonderful teacher in our school named Eric Balzerini who put together an incredible video explaining this expression, flatten the curve. And he probably had a fun time putting this together. It probably took him a bit of time. But that video has been shared so many times, and there's been so much learning that's come from that video. Think of the podcast idea that Victoria is coming up with, and the amount of people that this can reach, and the opportunity to share just interesting tidbits of information. And when did learning move so far away from, let's just talk about it? Let's just talk and see what we can learn from each other. When did that ever stop? And now is the time to go back to that and form community and talk about things that we're interested in and learn from people who maybe know a bit more than us. And Victoria's podcast is just one of just countless opportunities to channel this sort of new way of learning to a stressed out society. But maybe the stress can be relieved if we think of education and reimagine learning completely. This could be a great reset button. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. What about you, Victoria? What are you seeing or foreseeing as opportunities as we've turned this into, or some of the challenges that families might face, or like just thinking about their needs?
Well, I love listening to all of you guys. I'm like, yes, I agree, and I agree with this, and I agree with this. It just seems like, yeah, I totally am on board with all what you guys are saying. I think there's this amazing opportunity to shift the way we view education. And I just think the family is so powerful. It's just such a powerful unit. And this is our opportunity to be able to utilize that and to empower kids. And, you know, I think about one activity we do in my class. It's called the STEM Arcade, Kane's Arcade. And I always, I tell the parents before Christmas, I say, okay, you're going to do this with your kids. And when we actually do it in our class, they bring their cardboard arcade games that they've designed with their parents. And some of them do them by themselves, but majority of kids actually do it with their parents. But when I asked the kids, what was your favorite part about doing this arcade game and building your cardboard arcade game, they're like, I did it with my mom. I did it with my dad. I did it with my grandpa. And it's always the same thing. And there's this value about feeling like they've been seen and they're valued. And I just think that this is a great opportunity for us to be able to tap into that family unit. And yet in the same regard, we also have to give that grace, because we have families who, may have had a family member pass away, or, they've just lost their jobs, so I feel like we're going to be navigating an emotional landscape that needs teachers and all of us to show more empathy and compassion and be vulnerable and be able to sit screen to screen with a kid, or maybe even with a parent, and say like, yeah, I understand. I'm there too. And it's okay. And, I know in the province of British Columbia, they've announced that all kids are going to pass. They're all going to go on to the next grade. So if that's the case, maybe we need to focus more on the self-awareness piece and the mindfulness piece, and the piece where it says, you know what, just sit with your dad who's upset. Maybe just give him understand, like maybe navigate, like anger is a secondary emotion. So what is that why is he angry? Well, he's grieving. So it's it'll be a very interesting teaching experience, but I think it'll be valuable. And I feel like we'll be able to walk away from this going, we're going to be different human beings. Like from the start to the end, I feel like there's a transformation happening here. And there are conversations here that are talking about what really matters. Well, what really matters is being able to invest in our children and our families positive messages during a time when it's really hard. So
yeah, and I think this kind of circles back to, if you really want to make a curricular tie, a lot of what all of you are describing is the work of core competencies. And core competencies, for the parents who are listening, are things, these are the major life skills, and we've traditionally called them soft skills in business settings, but things like communication, things like personal responsibility and awareness, things like social responsibility, critical thinking, creative thinking, these are all pieces of the work that is done kind of through the entire curriculum, not just in any specific subject, but across the entire school experience. And I think as educators, we need to lean into this core competency work as much as we can. And Tim, I really loved what you said about just creating something, right? Creating something that's shareable, or learning out loud. I think there's so many experiences we can have by learning online. For example, when I was on maternity leave last year, I watched a lot of YouTube videos and taught myself through those videos how to crochet. And I put it down for quite a while because I, as a new mom going back to work and going to teach at a new grade in a new school, there was a lot of change in my life. So I just picked up my crochet hook for the first time in probably almost a year just the other day, because I'm sitting at home while the kid is napping and going, oh, I've been staring at a screen for the better part of the last 2 hours. So, those are the types of things. Like now I'm creating something with a crochet hook and some yarn that didn't exist before. And I think that's really fun and cool. And what if kids were sharing those types of learning? So you gave them a task, you have to learn something or teach yourself something you didn't know how to do before. Some of the challenges with that are, of course, their access to different tools depending on what they want to do. But you can always revert to something as simple as learning how to draw or learning how to use an app on your device that you already have access to, or the possibilities are really endless here. So leaning into that core competency work is something that I see as just a big piece of what we need to do as educators moving forward, with that messaging about this isn't school as we know it. It can't be school as we know it, because we just don't have that face-to-face interaction to make that so.
On the note of the core competencies, if I could give an example from the high school setting, a few months ago, one of our grade 12 students, just a fantastic student, her name is Chloe, came to me and asked for a reference letter, or actually that I would fill in a form for Simon Fraser University, and in order to get a scholarship. And so I filled it in, and interestingly enough, Simon Fraser's first three questions actually had nothing to do with academics, but had everything to do what kind of a person is this? What have they done at school? What have they been involved with? Have they run any clubs? Have they started anything? Have they been involved in competitions? It had nothing to do with their GPA. These are the soft skills that we call core competencies. And the result of me being able to fill in that form with all the things that Chloe had done, she just has been told she's been awarded $27,000 to attend Simon Fraser University. Well, yeah, she did have good marks, but she'd also done all these other things and become so responsible with her own development. So it's something that really needs to be emphasized. There's an article I've got right here that supports some of this. It's been shared quite a bit on Twitter recently. And one little section says, when young people are put in a position to explore their interests, the idea of who an educator is naturally expands. Teachers, parents, employers, community and religious leaders, business owners, and other young people all become educators, naturally offering their expertise in service of a young person's learning journey. If this current moment of nationwide distance learning is showing us anything, it is that we all have the ability to help someone learn how to do something, it makes sense of something, or learn something together. That was an article that was being tweeted around, written by a lady named Kelly Young. And I don't know Kelly Young, but this article has been tweeted. It's called COVID-19, an invitation to pause, reflect, and embrace the power of community. So it's available online.
Well, and I love this because you were the one who said, like learning doesn't stop at a school setting. It doesn't have to be from a book. So why does an educator have to just be a teacher? I think that's very well said.
I think this is also a good point to mention about, like, I know I've been in meetings where you kind of have this vibe from parents that you're the teacher and you're the expert and that you do what you do at school and we'll just go ahead and do what we do at home. And I think this is going to be a wonderful opportunity for families to step into becoming a teacher in those loose terms, because you know what? We are all teachers. And we all have things to give to this community, and I think this is what we're really all speaking about, is this idea that, like, we can all do this, and we can do this. Like, I think also parents need that cheerleader to say, you know what, you can do this, and you do it in your capacity, but you know what, you have talents and skills that you can share with your kids. And you know what? Sit down with them and say, hey, what do you want to learn? Like, walk around your house or look out your window and say, hey, what do you see outside and what do you want to learn? Like, what do you see that you really would like to know more about?
What have you always been interested in?
Yes. Yeah. And I think, you know what, sometimes we get into this routine of just go, 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 school, 9 to 3, 9 to 3, 9 to 3. We're breaking those walls. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a really wonderful thing. And we have an opportunity, every one of us. And I'm also saying, you know what, like, I know, Tim, you had mentioned about family members, across Canada. Why not talk to, a relative that's in Ontario, and maybe they have a wonderful skill set for, knitting, or, they like woodworking. Why don't you start interviewing family members online? Why don't you reach out to someone on Twitter? I know last summer my mom had got this like really unique like mini crocodile. We didn't know exactly what it was. Went on Twitter, and there was some kind of Australian bone expert. So my kids and I uploaded a picture to this bone expert in Australia, and we had this wonderful conversation on Twitter about, what it was and what kind of species it was. And she was like, this is an amazing species, and so those kind of things, you know what I mean? Go down into your garage, open those boxes, even organizing things. There's a life skill in organization.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, hey, we've got our toolbox that we've been dumping nails and everything into, which I know is my life right now. Hey, let's find where all those things go, and let's organize it. Like, and I keep on using this language with my kids. This is our house. This is not my house. This is our house. So let's do what we want for our house, And so I just think there's opportunities for that. I was in touch with a friend who's living in a small apartment in Vancouver, and she's like, yeah, me and my husband are painting. We just want to paint. Like, do the things that you want to do with your home. Beautify it. You know what I mean?
Have your kids involved.
Yeah. Paint a mural.
Yeah. And the amount of artwork, I saw a beautiful thing on the news where at Trout Lake in Burnaby, some family had drawn these encouraging posters and stapled them to every tree as you go around the path. Another one I saw beautifully was at Aldergrove Regional Park. As we walked around the trail, there were little stones, little river rocks that had been painted and placed along. Now, somebody did that.
Yeah.
Somebody said, hey, here's a neat idea of encouragement. Let's grab up a bunch of stones, we'll paint them, and then we'll just place them and leave them there. What if somebody takes them? Great.
Yeah.
Take them.
Yeah.
What if you leave it there for the next person to look at? Great. Do that too.
Yeah.
And somebody's done that. Some mother probably has said, hey, kids, let's do this. You're home. You're not going to school. What a great opportunity to spread encouragement through art. And leave it in the park just for anybody to enjoy.
There's actually a group of moms who put together a project, that the rock project that you're speaking about. It's called Fort Langley Rocks. If you take a look on Facebook, and they started this in Fort Langley actually before the pandemic
on the Fort to Fort
started.
trail.
Yeah, and so then they started this project, and now, especially now, because people are, you're at home, you're looking for activities to do and encouraging people. We have everything from rocks to encouraging sidewalk chalk messages saying we can get through this, and people putting hangings in their windows. The Hearts Project you mentioned, I think Anne, you mentioned that. You've got all these different communities that are coming together to encourage the greater populace. Another encouraging one is the applause for the medical workers at 7 p.m. every night. I thought that was really amazing. And you see these, I'm sure that if we get a little bit more lockdown here, we'll see a little bit more of this, but I'm sure you've seen the kind of mini impromptu concerts on people's balconies in Italy, right? And just some of those heartwarming moments where people are sharing their love of art or music or learning. And I think that's really what our role is as teachers and family members toward our children right now, is to encourage them to look for those joyful moments and look for the gratitude inside of what we're experiencing together. I think there's definitely going to be some families who struggle with this because they themselves are maybe one of those frontline medical workers. And so I think we also have to empathize with the fact that as much as we talk about these wonderful notions of what learning can look like, there's going to be families that can't accommodate that with their children. And I think we need to be also aware of that as teachers, as we start to navigate what online learning or what we can put out to kids, what it might look like. So
you think of the very fact that the four of us are having a conversation, but we're not physically together.
mm-hmm.
And so there are these online opportunities. Zoom has, of course, become kind of the go-to recently. Victoria, you mentioned that you could reach out to family members who could act in terms of as an expert. Just this week, my wife, who teaches a course at University of Fraser Valley, got my son, who's in his last year studying to be a chiropractor, to speak to her kinesiology class. So they had a Zoom conversation, recorded it, and then uploaded it to make available. So, for example, when people think, well, I can't teach at home, yeah, but somebody can.
Yeah.
Find that person. I can't help overemphasize the need to find these things. Like, Victoria, you mentioned about learning to crochet, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you can learn anything online. And on Twitter, for example, there's so many people discussing this very thing. I happened to stumble across a Twitter conversation, and I just jumped in and I said, hey, I see what you're talking about. Could I actually interview you? And people are very open to that. If you say, I'd like to learn what you're talking about there. And so I have a Zoom meeting on Monday to discuss salmon, of all things, because I happen to bump into somebody virtually on Twitter, and they're very open to this sort of thing. So there's no really prerequisite that any home needs to be the source of all the education. If you got an access to getting online, which again, there's another piece we have to be very sensitive to, is the ability to get online is not universal.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can, there are people out there who are very willing to share their knowledge and expertise. And sometimes you just have to find them and ask them the right question.
Well, and it might not even be a matter of knowledge and expertise, like we're talking about a lot of I'm learning from a person, but sometimes you just need to look at the right thing to be inspired as well. There's an artist, and on Instagram he goes by the handle Cinta Scotch, so that's CINTA and then Scotch SCOTCH. And what he does is he takes inanimate objects. So let's just say he takes something like a Post-it note package, and then he'll turn it into something. So this will be part of his art, but he could turn it into like a house on a busy street, or he could turn it into a dog house with a dog laying at the door, or whatever. So he has this really amazing account. And if you look at that, like this is something I'm planning to task my kids with next week, is what kind of art can you make with the inanimate objects in your house with this as the inspiration. So he does all kinds of things from videos to still images, but it's a pretty amazing little project, and you can just find these little things to boost your creativity as well, not just looking for links for learning.
And just on that front, I really like that idea. A couple years ago, I'd heard about the googly eyes. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but there were people who had bought googly eyes and started putting them up in universities to make out of like different pictures and make mouths out of whatever the background is, but to still have the googly eyes. And so the other day I'd opened an old container of hot chocolate, which was a reindeer, and it had googly eyes. And I'm just going to put it here. I don't know if you can really see it. But anyway, the googly eyes fell on this pile, this bunch of water on my stove. And so I took a picture of it, like this little googly eyes with this mouth going,
Looks like an amoeba.
Yeah, amoeba. Yeah. But you know how easy it would be, even if you don't have official googly eyes, where you could just draw on a white piece of paper with black eyes and go around and stick and take pictures of them. And maybe the journey of the googly eyes, right? Just doing those kind of fun little interactive things, which is very low cost. But yet, like you said, this looks like amoeba. Why don't you show this picture to someone, in your family and say, what do you think it is? And do a vote,
Tell a story about it.
Yeah, tell a story.
Yes, tell a story, yeah.
The crochet thing from YouTube, there's a very respectable astrophysicist that I listen to often. His name is Michio Kaku. teaches at City University in New York, and is an online media influencer. One of the things he said, I'll never forget it, is if you want to know more than probably 99% of the people on the street, find 5 very good YouTube videos on the topic you're interested in and watch them, and you will become more knowledgeable about that one thing than most people that you bump into. Of course, we don't bump into many people these days, but now if you want to get into that top, what that 1% that knows more than you, well, that's what higher education is for. That's what universities are for. What are our jobs as teachers, as parents, is to make you aware, to say, did you know that this exists? Let me tell you that this is something that's out there. Maybe you didn't know about it. Now you know about it. Find out 5 very fascinating things about this topic, and then come back and tell me what you've learned. And if you get fired up about it, stick with it, learn some more. And then in a few years, when you're ready to go off beyond high school, go to university and join that 1% who knows more than everybody else. Our job is simply to expose people to ideas and concepts and get them interested and having fun learning new things, just like you did with learning to crochet. Yeah. How many kids can crochet? But what a great skill. You see them in maternity wards all the time. You see cancer wards all the time. People crocheting hats and toques and mittens and gloves. What a great thing. And how did you learn it? Well, from YouTube. And this is a very valid thing.
Yeah. YouTube and a lot of Facebook crochet groups.
Exactly. The new time we're living in.
Well, guys, we have been talking for a long time, and I feel like, I don't know about you guys, but it's been empowering and inspiring, and I feel like I'm going to walk away with it from this conversation, just being positive. And, and I feel like what we've started talking here about, hopefully the people and the listeners will continue to talk about that. Does anyone have any last words or any last thoughts that you wanted to share? Maybe we could start with Victoria Ellis.
I just think that just coming back and circling back to the intent behind what I was hoping to get out of this, which I think we did, was just to check in with the social emotional upheaval that people are feeling, and to remember to empathize, remember to be kind, remember to be gracious toward the things that you do have, and just trying to see where kids are as you navigate this. I can't remember who said it, but they're watching, right? They're watching what we're doing and how we're handling this. So being honest and truthful, but also, acknowledging you're a human at the same time. I think that'll go a long way to building a more emotionally intelligent future.
Tim, do you have anything to say?
Well, I mean, usually I do, but honestly, I am an eternal optimist and excited about opportunities. However, the one thing I've taken from this conversation from the 3 of you is I just have to remember that empathy side and that grace side is so important, and it's not the first thing that comes to my mind, but it needs to be. And thank you so much for highlighting those that aspect of relationship. And I'm going to be thinking about that in all my interactions. So thank you very much.
And Anne?
I just want to say that in our journey, that we will be able to look back in a year and see this as a really rich time. And I know right now we don't really have that foresight, but that we can be optimistic about the future in the means of just building stronger relationships, stronger connections with others, reaching out to people who need to be reached out to, even if they don't respond, and giving us that grace. I just want to also say that to those families out there, those parents, that you can do it. And that your love for your kids is actually the most important thing they need right now, and just being present. So if that means you do a no Wi-Fi Wednesday and you put all the devices away and you don't turn on the news and, you know, you take a break from conversations even saying COVID or, you know, coronavirus, give yourself that break if you need it, and just step into creativity. Ask your kids, what are you interested in? What do you want to learn to do? And you could ask yourself that. What do I want to do in this time? You know? And, you know, you could just binge on Netflix. You have that option. But also maybe take this as an opportunity, as a gift to learn new things, connect with new people, reach out on Twitter, go on Instagram, go connect with people that you've never connected with, and just to be present and enjoy this time in the ways that we can, in the capacity you can. So I just think this is going to be an interesting ride ahead, but we're in it together. And yeah, thank you for this. I really appreciate the conversation.
Well, I want to take the time to thank all three of you for being part of this special episode on self-care. Thank you, Anne, for your insights, and Tim for your insights, and Victoria, thank you so much for putting questions together and leading us through the last 45 minutes. Appreciate the time that we've taken to dig deep. It feels like we've dug deep today, and I hope if you are listening through a podcast or maybe you're watching us on YouTube, if you have any questions or if you want to connect with any of us, you can reach out to me at mykidslocker.com. You can take some time today to maybe pause and think about some of the stuff we have talked about today, about empathy and compassion, about learning, about different ways of learning, about possibly getting people to connect with you and your kids that have certain skills. And maybe what school used to look like for us is going to look very different in the next days, weeks, and months. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining us today. This is Victoria Woelders, your COVID-19 Ed podcast host, signing off. And once again, thank you so much to Anne, Tim, and Victoria for being part of this amazing conversation. Thank you.